Hello everybody, it is Nicole from iiKiui and welcome to another behind the scenes video for my elementals. This will pretty much be the same as my other ones, but just going over the earth one instead of fire and water. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's the final as I've shown in the video before. So like I said, this is the final product, but here is the sketch. And the sketch, I'm not sure when I finished it, but I know I started it on the 24th last year in December. So Christmas Eve. And that was kind of when I was doing my big rush of elementals. So this is what it looks like, and here you see I have just some notes: green bottom, light brown, moss light green, dark green, colorful for the flowers in her hair. And then green background, no liner, only lines on character. And it turns out that I did line the leaves, but I did it in a different color so that it wouldn't stand out as much. And then I kind of named it Earth, Forest, Wood, Elemental, just because I wasn't sure what to name it. But this was actually not the first sketch. The first sketch was this one, and this is in my sketchbook that I did all my Inktober's in. Well, not all of them. I did the last half of my Inktober's in here, and this is the first sketch. You can see the flowers are different because I wasn't really planning anything. The bird does not look like a bird, and it's on a really small sketchbook, so I transferred it over to this piece of paper where I was able to expand, and I made the bird a little bit more realistic because I used reference along with this bird too. And I also use reference for the deer, and if you hear anything, that's snow falling from the roofs, and then rabbits and a squirrel. So for the colors, I used this green inside of the hair, and just to make it more earthy green instead of a kind of fake green. And then I also used, I didn't even clean it yet, but my earth elemental colors are here. And I used the Koi Sakura watercolor palette, and I used this one mainly. I think I used this brown, it's kind of like a yellow ochre, then this brown, and then I used some black just to darken it. So you can kind of see my mess, but it's like a dark brown, and then I used a kind of sage color. There's the yellow ochre in the middle, more green, and then the pink, which I added in later. So I also used these Arteza watercolor pencils, which I recently reviewed, and I did use it in my water elemental, but it didn't really go as well as I'd hoped. However, in this one it did work out a lot better. Since I couldn't get a dark enough brown, I used these three colors to kind of blend it. So here we have Sienna Brown, which is kind of similar to what was already there, and then Cocoa and Espresso, and these two were the darker ones, which I kind of just blended all the watercolors together with, and it made a good shadow. These two colors here, Cinnamon and Burnt Ochre, are just used for darkening the fawn that was in the background, so that's what I used that for. Especially because it was a little difficult for me to mix in colors that would be the right shades, so that really helped. And then this pink, which is called Flamingo, I used for just darkening some pinks. Because they were so small, I thought using a fine tip would help. And then this is the color that I used first for the leaves, which is called Pear, but it turned out to be more chartreuse than an earthy tone, so I ended up scrapping that one, although it still showed through after I put water on it. And then I went over most of it in moss. Forest green was used in the hair, but the moss color was used for the leaves in the background, as well as the moss on her. So you can see here, this is where I added in the moss, and if you can slightly see, I kind of try to dim it out as much as possible, but the pear kind of shows through. It's a little bit brighter than I wanted it to be, but you can see I added in color pencils, so you can really see the texture up close. So on the fawn, and then on the leaves, and even on her, it kind of gives her a graininess, which really helps for the wood texture, so that's what I did. And I also added it for the rabbit that looks like Tommy. Next we have the Color It pens, which I've been using in all of them so far. I use this one quite a bit. It is called Optimal Olive, and it is this dark green that you see in her hair. I basically used it without blending anything so that it would darken it and make it more like in the shadow. And I even went over it a couple days later just to darken it even more and just layer it over the entire thing. So you can kind of see where I added that in. The next one I used was called Proud Pale Green. And this one is a light green. It is a little bit lighter and more pastel than what I wanted, but I did use it for some parts of the moss. Most of the moss I did actually just use regular watercolors, but you can kind of see where it would show through. I mainly used it in the darker areas. Next we have the brown, which is called Hardy Brown, and I use this for most of the shadows, just darkening them, and then with that I would use the watercolor pencils and make a gradation. And for places like the branches I would use this pen as well. And lastly I use this peachy color, which is called Positive Peach, and I use that for the places that have pink in it that I didn't want to be too artificial pink, so I made it a little bit more peachy in the end. And then to outline it, as always, I use my outline fine liners in the even number, and then for the leaves I use my Stabilo pen in, well, I guess this doesn't have a color name, but it's like this apple green. And that's what I used for the outline of the leaves, which if I had a darker color that wasn't too dark, like a medium green, then I probably would have used that instead. So that about wraps up this behind the scenes. So you can actually see the difference in how it would look colored compared to the sketch, which is really interesting to me, especially things that have a lot more contrast now, or just have color in them. It's so different compared to just the line work. So I hope you guys enjoyed this behind the scenes and enjoyed the Earth Elemental. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Keep drawing, keep painting, and I'll see you guys next time.